Quantum jumping is real. Here's how to shift timelines. Fast, not by accident. Not by the randomness of an algorithm. Not by coincidence. It arrived here because your frequency, your timeline, your very field of probability was already calling for it. You may not realize it yet, but something in you has been transmitting. A signal, subtle but persistent, rising from the deeper currents of your being. And this message is its reply. Because somewhere, deep inside, you already know. Reality is not fixed. It bends, it shifts. It flickers in and out like light upon water. You have glimpsed this truth in dream fragments. In those strange déjà vu spirals where the present feels like a rehearsal. In uncanny crossings, where you think of someone and they suddenly call. In nights when the boundary between me and world dissolved for a breath, and you wondered, what if the fabric is thinner than I thought? Most people ignore these whispers. Most scroll past, lulled back into the trance of cause and effect, the heavy drag of the ordinary. But not you. Only a rare kind of mind notices the seams. Only a rare kind of soul feels the tug of alternate doors. And here you are, pausing, listening, entering the threshold. This is no small thing. You stand at a seam in time, a hinge, a threshold between the life you've been living and the infinite lives still waiting to unfold. Take a breath here. Feel into that. This moment is not entertainment, it is initiation. Because what you decide to do with the recognition that reality is malleable will echo into everything that follows. Have you noticed how your future self seems to call back to you? How some nights you feel the pull of a version of you already standing taller, freer, more luminous? It's not imagination, it's resonance. Physics tells us that particles exist as probabilities until observed. Mystics tell us that lives exist as probabilities until chosen. And your presence here suggests that your probabilities are pressing at the edges of collapse, ready to crystallize into something new. You may feel restless. You may feel misplaced in your current storyline, as if your body is sitting in one life while your soul is leaning into another. This dissonance is not failure. It's signal. It means you are close to transition, what quantum scientists might call a phase shift. Understand this clearly. Not everyone is capable of perceiving the shift. Not everyone notices when time bends, when a symbol repeats, when the dream bleeds into waking. But you catch it. And that makes you dangerous to the rigidity of the system. It makes you luminous to the unseen. It makes you rare. That's why this message found you. Because reality responds to those who notice it. Because you are already destabilizing the script you were handed. And because you are needed, not only for your own liberation, but for what your liberation signals to the whole of humanity. So take this not as a video playing before you, but as a call echoing across timelines, a door swinging open. Stay. Because what unfolds next may change the trajectory not only of your personal timeline, but of the collective story we are all still writing. This is the trap. Not a dramatic sting of fate, but a gentle, steady narrowing, like salt water slowly crystallizing around a seed. Most people live their lives on a single track, convinced the map is fixed, that the train of fate runs only one route. They stitch meaning to habit, and habit becomes destiny. They learn to read the world as a linear ledger. Cause, effect, repeat. Have you noticed how ordinary language betrays this belief? We'll see what happens. That's just how it is. Some things are fixed. These are not innocent phrases. They are conditioning. They are the optics of a system that prefers predictability to possibility. But you have felt something different. A quiet dissonance, a pressure behind your ribs, a sense that a parallel path is pressing at the seam of your life, waiting for permission. Maybe it came as an impossible impulse. Maybe it arrived as a pattern in your dreams, or a recurrence of symbols. Maybe you woke up one morning and the mirror looked like the wrong timeline for you. Here is the danger. The trap is not that timelines are forever closed. The danger is that you will assent to smallness, that you will sedate yourself back onto the known track by believing the script is the script. Ask yourself, how many times have you caught a glimpse of something else? An idea, a version of you, a future that felt more aligned, and then let it go because it looked impractical, too risky, or selfish? How many times did you fold the image back into the wardrobe of someday and surrender the logic of probability to the tyranny of habit? This is not merely about choice. It is about a cognitive ecology that trains you to collapse probability waves into one preferred outcome, the ordinary one. The system rewards predictability. It punishes deviation with social criticism, logistical friction, and the slow erosion of self-trust. Over time, this punishment teaches you to prefer the safe failure, the ache you can explain and therefore tolerate. I call this the default script trap. It operates on 3 levels at once. You begin to interpret signals of possibility as anomalies, not invitations. Déjà vu becomes weird, not a breadcrumb. A repeated symbol becomes coincidence, not a signpost. Your observer collapses probability into what seems sensible. Hope is rebranded as fantasy. Risk as irresponsibility. So you calm the inner unrest with small compensations, entertainment, busyness, polite resignations, until the dissonance feels like background noise, not a summons. The social terrain, institutions, families, economic structures, subtly penalizes timeline shifting. They have optics, stakes, hidden knives. Staying puts you in harmony with the collective ledger. Leaving creates friction, and friction feels like danger. This tripartite trap is clever. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It rearranges your inner language so you no longer recognize the cracks. You think the train has one destination because everyone else behaves as if it does. You measure your possible selves against their expectations and feel the shrinking. The irony is painful. The very community that comforts you with consensus is often the community that anchors you to a life that never quite fits. But here's the quiet, subversive truth. The seam exists because probability waves are thick. Your attention, the way you observe, expect, and choose, is the instrument that causes collapse. When you notice, you change the field. When you refuse to be sedated by consensus, you become a coherent observer. You create a new collapse. This is not a call to reckless fantasy. It is not permission for naive leaps. It is a call to reclaim the competency of your attention. You are not broken for perceiving the seam. You are dangerous in the best way. Your discomfort is evidence that your probability space is ripe. But there is a catch. The longer you treat that rip as an irritant, the thinner your tolerance becomes for complexity. The window for lucid transition narrows because you trade agency for comfort. That is how the trap completes itself. So notice the patterns that keep you small. Name them. Watch how language, ritual, and social optics conspire to tuck you back into the default script. This is reconnaissance. Map the mechanisms. This is how you begin to dismantle the trap. Temporal echo. How many times has a small act of courage, one conversation, one application, one move, created a ripple you later called luck? How many times did you attribute that ripple to chance instead of to a tiny reorientation of attention? This trap is the first enemy. It is subtle, patient, and committed to your acquiescence. Recognizing it is the first initiation. Seeing the force field around your attention is the first lever. If you can hold that seeing without self-blame, without triumphalism, you will be ready to move into the deep explanation, the patterns and mundane signals that show you exactly where the seam opens and how to step through without detonating into confusion. Stay with the feeling. The seam is real. The trap is real. But they are not final. You are closer to the hinge than you think. You think these moments are tiny. You think they're cute oddities of a busy life. But they are not small. They are the language of probability speaking to you in plain clothes. Have you ever reached for your phone at the exact instant the message appears? Have you ever walked past a shop window and felt it whisper a story you haven't learned yet? Have you stood in a crowded room and felt, with strange, fierce clarity, that one corner of the world was meant for you? Not tomorrow, but right now. These are not coincidences. They are timeline echoes. They are the soft throbbing of parallel probabilities nudging the surface of your now. Call them what you will. Synchronicities, signs, glitches, but call them. Name them. The act of naming converts noise into signal. It moves a trembling possibility from the background into the field of attention. And attention is the instrument that collapses probability waves into a path. Observe the pattern, and you will see 3 recurring textures in the fabric of your day-to-day life. Tiny convergences that feel like luck, the book that answers your question, the stranger who hands you the exact phrase you needed. They are micro-alignments, probability waves thinning into a coherent strand. When you habitually ignore them, you train your observer to default to skepticism. You flatten those waves before they can become a bridge, an image, a phrase, a dream symbol that repeats until its insistence becomes unbearable. Jung called these archetypal knocks. The mystics call them signposts. In quantum terms, they are recurring eigenstates waving at you from across timelines. You will feel them as déjà vu, as a memory that never actually occurred, because you are remembering from another possible now. People who arrive like cast members from an earlier life, or like avatars of a future one. You meet them and the conversation is déjà vu. The relational chemistry is a key you recognize before your mind does. These encounters are the field testing your coherence. They map the terrain where a phase transition might happen. Let me be blunt. The everyday is deliberately banal to dull your sensitivity. Systems prefer predictability. Language, ritual, work schedules, all of it trains you to expect the ordinary. That training is the apparatus of the default script trap. It reframes invitation as illusion. It teaches the observer to mistrust its own calibrations, which brings us to the most dangerous daily pattern of all, the observer loop. You notice a small anomaly. Your mind says, "That was weird." Your social mirror, family, friends, the ledger of normal life, answers, "You must be stressed." You internalize the explanation. The anomaly compresses into an anecdote. The observer loop completes. Notice, rationalize, dismiss, repeat. Over time, your field loses coherence. Probability waves that might have congealed into a different life evaporate into tolerated curiosity. There is also the shadow complex at play. Your unresolved emotions, your unintegrated archetypes, these are not irrelevant baggage. They shape the optics of your perception. When your shadow mask is heavy, you interpret invitation as threat. You mistake the nudge toward expansion for anxiety. You then armor up, and the very armor blunts the sensitivity that would have ferried you across. Notice how the world disciplines you with subtle power asymmetry. Institutions reward predictability. Families reward conformity. Sometimes the punishment is overt. Sometimes it is the slow leak of disapproval. Hidden knives, gossip, passive aggression, logistical friction are wielded not always out of malice, but out of fear. They sharpen the borders of the default track and make the alternative look hazardous. This is Machiavellian terrain. Optics matter. The social field creates inertia. So what do you do with these daily signals? First, catalog them. Keep a small ledger, a physical page, a voice note, a mental bookmark. Record the micro-alignments, the symbols, the relational echoes. Don't annotate them away. Let them pile. When you look back, patterns begin to reveal themselves. Probability becomes visible. Second, practice a soft reverence. Treat synchronicity like scripture. Pause when an alignment occurs. Breathe. Ask a small question. What might this be pointing toward? The posture of curiosity is not indulgence. It is calibration. Third, test with tiny bets. If a symbol repeats, take a micro-action that honors it. An email, a parked conversation, a page read, a step toward a small pivot. This is how coherence grows, not through dramatic leaps, but through repeated low-stakes realignments that train your attention to prefer possibility over resignation. Fourth, map your shadows. Learn the language of your inner resistances, the exact phrases you use when you collapse a probability into the comfortable story. When you hear those phrases, respond with one ritual sentence. Train a reflex that interrupts the observer loop. You are already doing more than most just by noticing this paragraph, by pausing to listen. That pause is not neutral. It is an increment of coherence. It nudges the field. It lengthens the window in which a phase transition can occur. And yet, and this is crucial, noticing without framework can sprawl into confusion. Without the next layer of proof and structure, your ledger of coincidences will feel like a pile of curiosities. That is why we move next from pattern into proof, a careful, rigorous folding of science and mysticism that shows why synchronicities are not quaint, why symbols are not noise, why those micro-alignments are the scaffolding for real leaps. Hold on to that ledger. Keep the reverence. The daily patterns are not hints. They are a map. They show the seam, the hinge, the precise place where a different life could take hold. When you learn to read them, truly read them, you stop being a passenger on a single track and become, instead, a coherent observer capable of collapsing probability toward a life that finally fits. Listen closely. The language of physics and the language of myth are not enemies. They are dialects of the same grammar. One speaks in equations, the other in archetypes. Both point to the same astonishing hinge. Until you observe, a possibility remains a possibility. Once you observe, it can become a path. Quantum physics gives us the clean metaphor and the blunt mechanism. Subatomic particles do not arrive as fixed points. They live as probability waves, smeared out suggestions of where they might be. The act of observation collapses those waves. The wave becomes a particle. A choice becomes a life. The scientist calls this the observer effect. The mystic calls it invocation. Either way, the implication is the same. Attention is a causative force. But don't let the word quantum seduce you into thinking this is only about microscopes and particle accelerators. Psychology maps the very same terrain at the scale of psyche. Your subconscious is a filtration system, an executive function that reduces the infinite buffet of possibility into the single dish you can carry. Cognitive scientists describe heuristics, biases, and pattern recognition as survival economy. Efficient, yes, but conservative. Your subconscious prefers coherence over chaos. It closes doors to keep you alive. Sometimes those doors keep you alive in a life that outsized your potential. Jung gives us the other angle: shadow complexes, archetypes, dream symbols. He taught that the psyche speaks through repetition, through motifs that haunt your nights and surprise your days. These motifs are not random. They are the architecture of meaning. When a symbol repeats, a river, a stair, a mask, it is not coincidence. It is a call to integrate a part of you that knows a different route. The corridor of worlds, the mystics say, is lined with such symbols. Learn their language and you learn the map. Now tie these three, quantum, cognitive, archetypal, together, and what you get is an operational theorem. Attention collapses probability into lived reality. But your attention is filtered by habit and shadow, and the world around you polices deviations with optics and terrain. In other words, you have the capacity to change tracks. You are trained to prefer tracks that look like safety, and the social field will push back when you try to diverge. This is where Machiavelli's voice slips in. Power asymmetry is not merely political, it's perceptual. The social terrain sets the optics. What is legible, what is respectable, what is plausible. Hidden knives take the form of raised eyebrows, logistical friction, career risk. Institutions and families, often out of love or fear, apply steady pressure to make your choices fold into the ledger of expectation. This is how the default script trap becomes durable. But the proofs are not merely theoretical. They are empirical and accessible if you know how to look. Consider the clinician's studies on attention and decision. When people deliberately shift focus, they change outcomes. Athletes call it being in the zone. Neuroscientists call it increased neural coherence. Athletes and neuroscientists both observe better performance, altered probability. This is not mystical blather. It is reproducible effect. Or look at social network dynamics. Small coordinated actions across a critical mass create phase transitions in public behavior. 100 people change a podcast, an algorithm notices, and the cultural field shifts. This is a social phase transition. It happens as abruptly as water boiling when enough heat is applied. The same is true internally. When a person's attention coheres around a new possibility, their behavior shifts, and new affordances open up. Let me make it practical, because proof without practice is sterile. When you begin to track your micro-alignments, the small convergences we named earlier, you are running a low-cost experiment in observation. You note the symbol, you pause, you test with a small action. Over weeks, those actions compound. Your nervous system learns a new expectation. Neural pathways strengthen. Probability waves find a preferred collapse that favors expansion rather than resignation. That is coherence in action. The mystic will remind you, ritual amplifies attention. The scientist will nod. Ritual stabilizes neural circuitry. Both agree repetition is the crucible of change. Repetition converts intention into habit, and habit into field-shaping force. So when you hear the word proof here, understand it as layered, theoretical, experiential, and social. Quantum shows you the mechanism. Psychology shows you the filter. Myth shows you the map. Power dynamics show you the obstacles. And your day-to-day experiments, the ledger of small acts, show you the results. This is why you are not merely dreaming when you sense another life pressing at the seam. The seam is a measurable phenomenon. The mechanics are visible. The methods work. What remains is courage, the willingness to observe with precision, to name, to test, and to persist until those probability waves coherently favor a new path. Breathe. Record one recent symbol. Make one tiny test. We will use that experiment as the seed for the breakthrough process ahead. Stay with the proof. It is not belief you're being asked for. It is skill. The first time I felt the shift, it terrorized me. I walked into a room I had never entered before, a rented gallery in winter light, and the world folded in on itself. The photograph on the far wall was exactly where I had seen it in a dream 2 winters earlier. The chair by the window had the same frayed elbow. A woman at the corner table repeated a sentence I had rehearsed, aloud, in sleep months before. We only ever find what we're ready to recognize. The smell of citrus and old paper. The way the heater clicked on. Every small detail matched the script my subconscious had written long before my waking mind believed it was possible. For a second I thought I was dreaming within a dream. Then I realized I had crossed. The me in the dream. The version that had dared to expect different scenes. Different people, different textures of life, had finally collapsed into the me standing in that room. The 2 probability lines converged. The collapse was not loud. It didn't arrive with trumpets. It was a tiny, seismic settling inside my chest, like a book finally lying flat on a table after being perched on its edge for years. It terrified me because it made the invisible visible. It forced me to accept responsibility for the way attention acts as a hinge. If probability waves can condense into life, then my habits, my tiny acts of noticing, my internal language, all of them mattered far more than I had allowed. That responsibility felt dangerous. It felt like power. And that mixture of fear and power is the anatomy of initiation. Let me be honest about what happened next, because this is the part most teachers skip. I recoiled. I closed the ledger. I told myself it was coincidence. I laughed the instinct off. Old voices, the polite neurologies of habit, whispered, "Don't be credulous. Don't risk being seen as delusional. Protect your life." I folded the experience into an anecdote I could tell at dinner parties, an oddity that would not threaten my safety. That recoil is instructive. It is the human reflex to collapse possibility back into the comfortable ledger. It is the observer loop in action. Notice, explain away, dismiss, repeat. The personal confession here is not drama about being brave or foolish. It is testimony about the default conditioning of survival mind. I chose safety first. I chose quiet. I chose smallness. For months after that room, I lived like a person who'd been given a secret and then locked it in a drawer. But something else happened too. The dream room did not vanish when I explained it away. Threads kept tugging. Symbols returned. A name, a street, a fragment of music. These micro-alignments resurfaced with patient insistence. The pattern was gentle but relentless. It was as if the universe was saying, "You can ignore this. You can rationalize. Or you can learn to read the map." So I decided to experiment. Not theatrically. Not with vows or dramatic renunciations. Small tests. Little inquiries that asked for evidence rather than faith. I began a ledger, a single page where I recorded 3 things each morning. One repeated symbol, one unexpected alignment, one small action taken in response. I practiced soft reverence when an alignment occurred. A breath, a whisper of thanks, a short note. I learned to answer the call with low-risk moves. These ordinary acts had extraordinary consequences. Over weeks, my attention recalibrated. Neural patterns shifted. The world around me started to look like a theater set that I could rearrange, not a script I had to accept. The phase transitions were quiet. A chosen conversation that led to an opportunity. A seemingly trivial decision that altered the topology of my daily life. Not miracles, mechanics. Why tell you this? Because confession erases the myth that initiation is always heroic. More often it is curious, patient, and messy. You will recoil. You will rationalize. You will feel foolish. That is part of the process. Admit it, name it, and then practice the small experiments that teach your observer to prefer possibility. One more thing. The fear that follows the first crossing is informative. It shows you where your shadow complexes live, the places you have been trained to avoid glory, risk, or visibility. Those shadows must be mapped, not shamed. When you map them, you stop mistaking invitation for threat. Now, if you can sit with that, with the memory of a first crossing, with the small confession of recoil, with the ledger that taught you to test, then you are ready for structure. You are ready for a method that will turn scattered experiments into a repeatable practice. In the next phase, I'll give you that method. A stepwise process with a new name, precise enough to train attention and practical enough to live by. Hold your ledger open. Keep that memory warm. We move next into the breakthrough process, the protocol that turns timeline awareness into timeline mastery. This is the method. Not theory dressed up as aspiration, a practical protocol you can practice in the small architecture of days. I call it the hinge technique because each tiny, intentional act becomes the mechanical hinge on which a new life swings. Remember the physics. Probability waves hang in superposition until an observer collapses them. Remember the psyche. Shadow complexes and habit filters prefer one easy collapse, usually the safe, familiar life. The hinge technique is a disciplined way to become the coherent observer who collapses toward the life you want, not the life you were taught to accept. 3 moves. 3 tiny engines of change. This is the simplest and hardest step. You catch a glitch, a repeating symbol, a synchrony, a déjà vu. Stop. Do not immediately translate it into story or skepticism. The habit reflex will try to explain it away. Too tired, coincidence, stress, and the observer loop will complete. Instead, cultivate the small interior pause. Breathe for 3 counts. Soften the jaw. Let curiosity arrive like a quiet guest. This pause is the cognitive equivalent of opening a door. Practice. When your phone buzzes exactly as you reach for it, stop. Name the phenomenon aloud, micro-alignment. Do not evaluate. Hold the attention lightly and let the moment register as signal, not noise. Why this works? Pausing prevents premature collapse into the default script. It lengthens the observation window, so your attention can favor possibility, not the practiced explanation. Now give the pause a direction. Frame the event as an invitation by asking one precise, imaginative question. What life would this belong to? Or which future self recognizes this symbol? You are shifting from passive witness to active cartographer. Give the event its context. Is this a career door? A love chemistry map? A creative path? Name the genre of the viable alternate life. Practice. Write one-line answers. If a recurring symbol is water, the hinge question might yield, this could belong to a life where I teach, where flow matters, where I relocate near coasts. Don't worry about logistics. Frame, then prioritize. Why this works? Framing translates raw coincidence into a map. It creates a narrative hypothesis your nervous system can test. It converts scattered signals into an intelligible vector. Micro-actions are not theater. They are low-risk, high-signal experiments designed to collapse probability toward the framed life. Each step must be specific, brief, and observable. Think of them as calibration moves for the field. Examples. Send one email that assumes the new identity. I'm writing to explore teaching opportunities. Schedule a 20-minute research session on a topic from your framed life. Join one small community aligned with that path. Rearrange one object in your environment that signals the new life. Place a map, change a playlist. Each micro-action is a tiny hinge swing. Repeated, they torque your probability space. Practice cadence. Commit to 3 micro-actions per week tied explicitly to one recurring symbol or alignment. Record the action and the outcome in your ledger. Date, symbol, action, result. This is your experimental log. Why this works? Repetition trains neural expectation. Neuroscience calls this increased coherence. Your nervous system begins to anticipate the new reality. Social and material affordances begin to align because you have altered optics, how you present yourself and what you attend to. A few operational rules so the hinge doesn't snap. Keep actions low cost. The aim is consistency, not drama. Keep curiosity as the driver, not desperation. Curiosity keeps coherence without frantic force. Keep a ledger. Data matters. Patterns show where to double down. When resistance rises, map the shadow language. The phrases you say that collapse possibility. That's not practical. Who am I to? Write them down and practice a counterphrase. Counterphrase ritual. When the shadow voice says not practical, respond with one precise sentence you choose ahead of time. Example: I will test this as an experiment, not a destiny. Repeat it aloud. This is the mental equivalent of bracing a hinge. The hinge technique is cumulative. One microaction will not rewrite your life, but repeated microactions, scaffolded by pause and frame, produce coherence. Phase transition is rarely an explosive leap. It is a threshold crossed after enough small collapses favor a new eigenstate. Your ledger will eventually show inflection points, moments where probability began to prefer a different outcome. Those are the hinge results, quietly revolutionary, a final instrument, ritual sealing. After each microaction, close with a short, exact sentence to anchor the shift. Say it aloud or write it in your ledger. Make it concrete. Here is one you can borrow and adapt. I choose this door. I will meet it halfway. This sentence trains attention and signals intent to your social field. It is small, repeatable, and sacred. This method is not magic. It is workmanship applied to attention. It turns dreamy intuition into measurable practice. Use the hinge technique daily for 30 days, and you will have built a new calibration. Your probability waves will begin to thin in the direction you select. Coherence grows. Phase transition becomes possible. Next, we will fold personal mastery into collective stakes. Why your hinge matters not only to you, but to the world. Hold the ledger open. Keep practicing the pause, the frame, and the step. The hinge is waiting. It begins as a private oscillation inside your chest, a decision you make late at night, a tiny act in a coffee shop, a micro-action recorded in the ledger. But the physics of attention and the topology of social systems conspire to amplify certain acts. One coherent observer folding toward a new possibility is not merely a solitary event. It is a signal. In network language, it is a node change. In mythic language, it is a single candle lit in a dark hall. In quantum language, it is a local collapse that biases nearby probability waves. Call it what you will. The personal jump becomes a public tide. Think of your life as a constellation rather than a solitary star. Each choice you make brightens one point in the pattern. Each microaction you repeat increases the coherence of that point, and coherent points influence the geometry of the whole. When enough of these points realign, the constellation reshapes. The sky you thought permanent subtly redraws itself. That is the constellation effect. Small, intentional acts cascade into collective phase transitions. Why does this matter now? Because the collective field, the cultural, political, and technological scaffolding around us, is currently in a slow, grinding default. It has inertia. It privileges continuity. It stores safety as conformity. This creates a feedback loop. When most observers collapse toward the ledgered outcome, social probability thickens around that outcome and pushes back against deviation. That is the default script trap writ large. Ecosystems of behavior that penalize divergence with optics, friction, and ridicule. The field trains survival by discouraging experimentation. Your leap interrupts that loop. When you practice the hinge technique and quietly begin to favor a different collapse, you nudge the local field. People around you, partners, colleagues, casual acquaintances, detect the change before they can articulate it. They feel a different density in conversation. They see you rearrange your life to match a new map. Mirrors in the social terrain flip. Some will recoil. Others will be drawn. Both reactions matter. The ones drawn become nodes. The ones who recoil reveal the hidden knives of entrenched systems. Both are information. This is where responsibility enters. The jump is not merely for personal freedom. It is a scalar lever. Your coherence creates permission for others. When one person elects a new story loud enough to be legible, it reduces perceived risk for those nearby. People who have been waiting for permission to try a different career, a different relationship, or a different way of being will see you and remember possibility. That memory is contagious. Consider social phase transitions in simple empirical terms, small coordinated acts across a critical mass change collective behavior. Movements begin in the micro-decisions of the many. In the same way, your repeated micro-actions create affordances for collective transformation. Your bravery is a seed. Your small consistency is fertilizer. Your ledger is the record that others borrow when they do not yet have proof of their own courage. There is also a moral architecture to this. When you choose a life aligned with deeper values, honesty, curiosity, stewardship, your coherence shifts the moral optics. Power asymmetry changes because optics change. Hidden knives lose their edge when a new narrative becomes legible and respectable. Institutions that once demanded conformity must now contend with altered expectations. This is not utopian wishcraft. It is the practical mechanics of social evolution. But beware, the constellation effect is directional, not neutral. If your micro-actions are driven by resentment, escapism, or a reflexive need to be contrarian, you will still create ripples. But they will bias the field toward confusion, not clarity. Intention matters. The method you learned, pause, frame, step, must be paired with ethical calibration. Ask yourself, what story am I amplifying? Who benefits? When your leap is aligned with generative values, the field tilts toward healing. When it is reactive, the field tilts toward more noise. Here is the beautiful catch. The world needs new constellations. In a time of repeating crises and recycled narratives, the ability to model different possible lives is radical. Each coherent observer who chooses intentionally becomes a template. That template grants permission, clarity, and a visible corridor for others to step into. So what is your role in the collective? It is simple and profound. Become legible. Make your micro-actions public in the way you are comfortable. Tell one trusted person. Post one small experiment. Arrange one object that signals your new life. These acts create optics. Optics create permission. Permission creates nodes. Nodes create phase transition, a closing ritual. Then, small, precise, sacred. Below in the comments, write one single word that names the life you are swinging toward. One word, no paragraphs. One word to call the force into being. Then beneath that, write the exact sentence you will use to seal a micro-action this week. For example, I will teach one class this month. Say that sentence aloud. Say it 3 times, steady as a bell. Finally, subscribe and press the bell, not as a consumer, but as an initiation. To join the frequency, to become part of the constellation. Subscribing is not merely convenience. It is an alignment. It marks you as a coherent observer who refuses the old scripts. This is how private beginnings become public transformation. This is how the single hinge becomes a door for many. The field is waiting for legible models. Become one, not by accident, not by a random scroll or a bored thumb. It found you because something in you has been quietly broadcasting, a frequency that the ordinary never quite contains. You feel it as a tug beneath the ribs, as a memory of a future self who already knows how to move. You have noticed the seams. You have felt the thin places where time flutters. Only a rare kind of mind pauses there and listens. Have you noticed how the present sometimes feels rehearsed? How a word arrives in the air before anyone speaks it? How a place you've never been looks like a set from an old dream? How certain decisions feel less like choices and more like recognitions, as if you are remembering the thing you are meant to do. If you're here, it is because you are standing near a hinge, a seam, a threshold between the life you have been living and the lives that still press against your skin. This is not entertainment. This is initiation. Only your kind of mind would pause here. Only your kind of heart would feel the ache that the world calls restlessness. You are rare. That rarity is not a burden. It is a responsibility. The moment you recognize probability as pliable, you begin to carry the craft of possibility. Breathe, because what follows is a map, a practice, a confession, and a mission. Stay with me. You were found for a reason. This is the trap. Not the grand cinematic trap you imagine, no obvious antagonist with a red velvet cloak. but a quiet, persistent narrowing. Imagine salt water slowly crystallizing around a seed until movement becomes impossibility. Most people learn to live on one track. They speak in the language of inevitability. That's just how life is. We'll see what happens. It's not for everyone. These phrases are not neutral. They are the architecture of surrender. They are the optics the system uses to maintain its ledger. You, however, have felt a dissonance. A pressure that tells you there is more than one rail beneath your feet. Perhaps it arrives as a dream that later lines up with waking detail. Perhaps as déjà vu so precise it feels like theft. Perhaps as an impossible pull toward a person, a place, or a calling. The danger is not that you cannot leap. The danger is that you will let the world convince you to prefer the comfortable failure, a life you can explain and therefore endure. The default script trap operates on 3 levels. Signals of possibility, recurring symbols, dream images, a nagging should are reinterpreted as anomalies. Your observer collapses richness into the most plausible narrative, the one that requires least friction to continue. Déjà vu becomes weird, not breadcrumb. Hope gets translated into fantasy. Risk becomes irresponsible. The world offers substitutes, busyness, entertainment, small compromises that quiet the ache without solving the underlying misfit. You learn to prefer the ache you can name. The social terrain, families, institutions, economic systems, rewards predictability. They apply optics and hidden knives, raised eyebrows, logistical friction, career risk. Staying aligns you with collective comfort. Leaving triggers resistance. This trap whispers. It arranges your language until you no longer recognize the cracks. That is its genius. It is patient. It wants your acquiescence. Recognizing the trap is the first initiation. Naming it is the first lever. From this recognition, we begin the work of undoing what taught you to settle. You see the signs everywhere if you choose to look. The phone vibrating in your hand, the exact moment a message arrives. The song on the radio that finishes the sentence you were about to say. Strange nostalgia for streets you've never walked. Meetings with strangers who speak the grammar of an old life you only half remember. These are not accidents. They are timeline echoes. They are the soft, persistent language of probability. There are 3 textures to these signals. Tiny convergences that feel like luck. The book that answers an unasked question. The phrase that appears in your feed. The stranger who hands you the exact line you needed. These are probability waves narrowing into a coherent strand. Images or phrases repeating until their insistence becomes unbearable. A river, a stair, a mask, these are archetypal knocks. They are the psyche's map-making. When they return, they point to corridors you have yet to walk. People who arrive as actors from a different act of your life. Conversation feels memorized. Chemistry shows up as recognition. These encounters are the field testing your coherence, where a phase transition might take place. The world trains you to ignore these patterns. Language, ritual, work schedules. They dull curiosity and reward predictability. That training produces the observer loop. Notice, rationalize, dismiss, repeat. Each loop flattens sensitivity until probability waves evaporate into tolerated curiosity. But notice this. Your unresolved shadows, the unintegrated complexes you carry, change how you read signals. Heavy shadow masks will misinterpret invitation as danger, and societal optics will often amplify that fear. Hidden knives carved from concern, gossip, or logistical friction sharpen the default path's edges. The terrain is Machiavellian. Optics matter. Practical steps matter too. Catalog your signals. Keep a ledger of micro-alignments and symbol recurrences. Practice a soft reverence. Breathe and ask, what might this be pointing toward? Then test with tiny bets, a short email, a 20-minute research dive, a conversation where you assume the new identity for a moment. Micro-actions train attention. Attention collapses probability. Coherence builds. This is the daily work. This is the apprenticeship. It is neither dramatic nor instantaneous. It is consistent. Over time, the seams widen. The hinge appears. Listen, physics, psychology, and myth are not contradictory. They are dialects of the same grammar. Quantum tells us particles live as probability waves until observed. The act of observation collapses potential into a definite state. Psychology explains how the mind reduces infinite possibility into one manageable narrative. Heuristics, biases, and pattern recognition keep us alive, but they also make us small. Jung teaches that the psyche speaks in archetypes and recurring symbols that demand integration. Mystics call the corridor between worlds the path of initiation. Put them together, and you get an operational theorem. Attention collapses probability into lived reality. But attention is filtered by habit and shadow, and the social field polices deviation. Therefore, you can change tracks, but the system will push back. These are not metaphors only. Look at empirical evidence. Athletes enter the zone through focused attention. Neuroscientists measure increased neural coherence and improved performance. Attention alters outcome. Clinicians show that deliberate shifts in focus change behavior patterns. Small, repeated acts shape neural circuitry. Social networks demonstrate phase transitions. When a critical mass alters behavior, cultural fields change rapidly. 1,000 small acts boil into a new collective state. Practically, when you log micro-alignments and respond with low-cost experiments, you create an observable dataset. Over weeks, patterns appear. Neural expectation shifts. Probability waves find preferred collapses that favor expansion. Ritual amplifies this. The mystic's invocation stabilizes the scientist's circuit. Repetition converts intention into habit. Habit converts into field-shaping force. Proof here is layered. Theoretical, experiential, social. Quantum provides mechanism. Psychology shows filters. Myth gives navigation. And your ledger provides data. This is not belief. It is practice, so record one symbol now. Make one tiny test. Measure. Repeat. The hinge technique, coming next, is the practical protocol that uses this proof to make change reliable. I'll admit something. The first time I felt the shift, it terrified me. I walked into a room I had never entered before, a rented gallery in winter light, and everything was exactly as in a dream I had 2 winters earlier. The photograph on the wall, the frayed chair by the window, the sentence a stranger repeated aloud that I'd rehearsed in sleep. We only ever find what we're ready to recognize. The smell of citrus. The heater's soft click, a woman's laugh like an echo. For a second I thought I was dreaming inside a dream. Then I realized the me in that dream had collapsed into the me standing there. It was small and seismic at once. It made the invisible visible. If attention could act as a hinge, if seemingly impossible alignments could become life, then everything I did mattered more than I had allowed. That responsibility felt dangerous. It felt like power, and power terrified me, so I recoiled. I closed the ledger. I told myself it was coincidence. I laughed the instinct off. Old voices, the polite neurologies of habit, whispered, "Don't be credulous. Don't be seen as delusional. Protect your life." I folded the experience into an anecdote I could tolerate. That recoil is part of the initiation. It is the human reflex: notice, explain away, retreat. It is the observer loop in action. But the dream room did not vanish when I rationalized it. The threads tugged. Symbols returned. A name, a street, a snatch of music. The micro-alignments were patient. So I began an experiment. Not dramatic, not theatrical. A simple ledger. Each morning, 3 items. 1 repeated symbol, 1 unexpected alignment, 1 small action taken in response. I practiced soft reverence when an alignment occurred. A breath, a whisper of thanks, a short note. I made tiny bets. An email written as if I were already the person I intended to become. A 20-minute research session. An arrangement of an object that signaled the new life. Weeks later, things looked different. Neural patterns shifted. The world rearranged itself, not with miracles, but with opportunities that matched the new coherence. The phase transition was quiet, a conversation that mattered, an opening I had not expected. Not magic, mechanics. The confession here is simple. You will recoil. You will feel foolish. You will let safety seduce you. That is human, name it. Map the shadow language that collapses possibility. Not practical. Who am I to? That's unrealistic. Then practice a counterphrase. Mine was, I will test this as an experiment, not a destiny. Say it aloud. Repeat it. It steadies the hinge. If you can keep this confession as companionship, not shame, you're ready for the method. The hinge technique will take these fragments and turn them into a repeatable craft. Here is the protocol. 3 moves. Precise, mundane, repeatable. The hinge technique makes attention into workmanship. When a glitch appears, a symbol, a synchrony, déjà vu, stop. Don't immediately translate it. The habit reflex will try to explain and dismiss. Breathe 3 counts. Soften your jaw. Let curiosity arrive like a modest guest. Name the event aloud. Micro-alignment. This pause is the cognitive door opening. It prevents snap collapse back into the default script. Practice. When the phone buzzes as you reach for it, pause. Say, micro-alignment. Feel the signal as a signal. Give the pause a direction. What life would this belong to? Which future self recognizes this symbol? Frame the event as an invitation. A brief hypothesis about the kind of life that would contain this detail. Is it a creative path? A relocation? A relationship? Write one-line answers. Don't solve logistics. Create a vector. Practice. If water repeats, your frame might be, this points toward a life that teaches flow, that lives near coastlines. This is mapping, not planning. Micro-actions are experiments, specific, low-cost, high-signal. Send 1 email as if you already inhabit the new identity. Read 1 book. Rearrange a corner of your home to signal the life you intend. Join 1 small group that practices the thing you aim to embody. Each micro-action is a hinge swing. Repeat them, and the hinge torque is reality. Practice cadence. 3 micro-actions per week, tied to 1 recurring symbol. Log them in your ledger. Date, symbol, action, result. Rules. Keep actions low cost. Consistency beats drama. Let curiosity lead, not desperation. Keep a ledger. Data reveals pattern. When resistance rises, map your shadow language and counter it with a pre-written sentence. I will test this as an experiment. Repeat it aloud. After each micro-action, seal it with a ritual sentence. Say it, write it, or both. A simple seal. I choose this door. I will meet it halfway. Repeat 3 times. Make it precise, small, sacred. This is not superstition. It is a neural anchor and a social signal. The hinge technique is cumulative. It trains attention, reshapes expectation, and creates new affordances in the social field. Use it for 30 days, and you will notice inflection points. Small moments where probability began to prefer a different outcome. Those are hinge results. Celebrate them, record them, multiply them. Now the work scales. Your leap is not merely personal. It is a signal. Imagine your life as a constellation. Each coherent choice brightens 1 star. When many stars realign, the sky redraws. Your micro-actions become nodes that shift the geometry of the field. This is the constellation effect. Small intentional acts cascade into a collective phase transition. Why care? Because the cultural terrain today prefers continuity. Institutions, families, and systems reward predictability. They make divergence costly. When you choose a new script, you create optics. Optics grant permission. Permission lowers perceived risk for those nearby. Your clarity becomes a template. People who have been waiting to change will see you and remember possibility. This is both political and moral. The field's power asymmetries soften when new narratives become legible and respectable. Hidden knives lose their sharpness when the mainstream accommodates new modes of life. But intention matters. If your micro-actions are reactive or resentful, they will still ripple, but toward confusion. Choose generative values. Ask, who benefits from this life? When your leap serves curiosity, stewardship, and truth, the field tilts toward healing. Practical. Make some of your experiments legible. Tell 1 trusted person about your ledger. Post 1 small test publicly if you can. Arrange an object that signals your new life and let people see it. These acts change optics. Optics change permission. Permission creates nodes. Nodes create phase transitions. This is your responsibility as a coherent observer. Become legible. Your private experiments become public templates. Your courage to model another life makes it easier for others to do the same. In a time of repeated narratives and recycled crisis, new constellations are radical. Be the template. If this message found you, do not let it pass as content. Seal it. In the comments, write 1 single word. Jump. That word is more than a hashtag. It is a hinge word, a signal to yourself and to the field. One word, no explanation. One commitment in language. Under that word, write the exact sentence that will seal one micro-action you will take this week. Make it specific. Make it measurable. For example, I will email one curator to propose a workshop. Or, I will teach one class this month. Or, I will spend 3 Saturdays learning digital design. Speak it. Write it, declare it, then subscribe. Not as consumption, but as initiation. Hit the bell as if you are joining a frequency, not as if you are clicking for convenience. Each new transmission you accept is a threshold you choose to meet. Subscribing is an alignment. It marks you as a coherent observer saying yes to the work, a sealing sentence to say aloud now, 3 times, steady as a bell. I choose this door. I will meet it halfway. Say it. Let it drop into your chest. Let it feel ridiculous. Let it feel real. Both are necessary. If you want to take it further, in the comments beneath your single word, write the one line that undoes your old collapse. The sentence you utter when the shadow voice says, "Not practical." Make your counter sentence exact and brief. Mine is, "I will test this as an experiment, not a destiny." Yours will be yours. Remember, micro-actions repeated become the hinges on which worlds swing. Your ledger will become a constellation map. Your coherence will give permission to others. Your single word in the comments will be a node that others may read and borrow when their courage is quiet. We are living through a time when the seams of the ordinary will be either reinforced or undone by small, repeated acts. Which constellation will you help to draw? This transmission ends as it began, not as instruction alone, but as a call. This message found you because you noticed the seams. Now choose, pause, frame, step, make your ledger. Light your star. Write jump. Seal your micro-action with a sentence. Say your seal aloud 3 times. Come back for the next transmission. We will go deeper into advanced calibrations, communal experiments, and the exact rituals that strengthen social phase transitions. But first, one small action. One hinge. One word. The timelines are not waiting. They are already here. Which one will you step into?